We good? We almost didn't make it today, brothers and sisters. We had a technical issue here this morning, tried to kill all of our equipment. Okay, so picking up where I left you off last week, I told you to get into Jeremiah and see if you could find the passage where the two houses are split by Yahweh. And I had the wrong chapter, so we'll see if anybody looked for it and found what chapter it's in. But before we get there, I did something I've never really done before. I went and found the timeline for the prophets. And we got Isaiah and Jonah both start, to the best of our understanding, start prophesying right about somewhere about 750 BC, generally in that area. And then Jeremiah is going to come about 100 years after Isaiah. The middle of Isaiah's time as a prophet, Jeremiah's middle of his time is going to be about 100 years later. Jeremiah is prophesying in the time when Jerusalem finally falls to Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar. He's also Joel, Ezekiel, Daniel are his contemporaries, and probably Nahum, Zephaniah, Habakkuk, and then Haggai and Zechariah are going to be right at the end of Jeremiah's time as a prophet, his service. So all of those prophets are right in that area, and a lot of them probably read each other, but they were definitely probably had read Isaiah. And we're going to be talking about the two houses, but I want to read something first. I'm going to start in Isaiah chapter 5, and I'm in verse 7. It says, "For the vineyard of Yahweh of armies is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his delightful plant." Now that's Hebrew parallelism there, and I've tried to teach what I've learned about this. A lot of people who are somewhat familiar with parallelism, they might say, well, the house of Israel and Judah, okay, that means they're the same. Not always. Parallelism does not necessarily mean what you see in one verse and the next verse are equal. It means they're connected somehow. They could be equals, they could be complementaries, they could be negatives. Sometimes the Hebrew parallelism will tell you this is good, that's bad. They're negatives. So what the parallelism tells us is that there's a relationship there somehow. But the point I want to point out, the thing I want to point out is Isaiah, 100 years or so before Jeremiah, is using the language house of Israel. When I was still learning to understand my scriptures really early in when I was reading for myself, I would read the Old Testament, and if I ran into Jacob, Judah, Israel, to me they were all, that's just Jews. And that's not the way the prophets see this. If we're talking about Jacob, you're talking about the 12 tribes, 13 tribes, the descendants of Jacob the man, which is what we today would think of as the ethnic descendants of Jacob. You're thinking about the bloodline of Jacob. If you see all of Israel or the whole house of Israel, now you're probably talking about all of those who have an allegiance to Yahweh. Not just the bloodline of Jacob, but all those who have been grafted in. So you got to be careful with that. If he starts talking, if Yahweh or his prophets start talking about Judah, you're talking the southern kingdom, almost always. Be careful when he talks about Israel. Especially if it says house of Israel, you're talking about the northern kingdom. If it just says house of Israel and not whole house, if there's not a modifier, if the prophet or scribe says house of Israel, you are almost, I haven't found a place yet where you're not talking about the northern kingdom. And sometimes he'll say Joseph or Ephraim instead. They're all the same in the prophet's mindset. Why? Joseph was put over his brothers. Remember his dream in Genesis where he's going to be over everybody? Who put him there? His father, Jacob, man Israel, put him there. And who did his father put as firstborn to the house of Joseph? Ephraim. So when the prophets are talking about Ephraim or Joseph, you pay close attention, because a lot of times it can be yes, okay? And it can also be standing in the place of the northern kingdom, the house of Israel. And this confused the bejeebers out of me when I was younger in my understanding of the scriptures until I found the passage of Jeremiah we're going to be going through, and I started to understand how the prophets use these terms, the people they're thinking of. Case in point, we just read Isaiah 5. Let's jump to Isaiah 9, and I'm going to begin in verse 8. And I've used this passage a lot. Yahweh sends a message against Jacob. So in the prophetic language, who's he talking to? The descendants of Jacob, the bloodline. And it falls on Israel. Well, I thought Israel was Jacob, or Jacob was Israel. Not in this case. Remember also where Isaiah is writing. You've got a divided kingdom already. Yahweh sends a message against Jacob, and it falls on Israel, house of Israel. And all the people know it. That is Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. Now that's where your parallelism explains something for you. What does he mean by Israel? That's the house of Israel. And he says Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. Well, who is Samaria? The house of Israel, the northern kingdom. So why is he talking about Ephraim? Ephraim is the leader of Joseph. He's the firstborn, holds the birthright. He's the head of the tribe of Joseph. Joseph's the head of all Israel. Not just, he's the head of Jacob now because his father put him there. It says, the bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with smooth stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will replace them with cedars. Therefore, Yahweh raises superior adversaries against them from Rezin and provokes their enemies, the Arameans from the east and the Philistines from the west, and they devour Israel with gaping jaws. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. Now, why is that passage important to us today in this country, in this day and age? Folks, this is 9/11. This is the attack on the United States in 9/11. This is the exact same prophecy to us. This prophecy here that Isaiah wrote was to the northern kingdom before they're going to fall. He's warning the northern kingdom they're going to be taken over because of their rebellion to Yahweh. We repeated this exact. Our leaders even quoted this passage from the numerous times as a boast, thinking it was a good thing. This is a curse, folks. Isaiah was warning the northern kingdom, and they didn't listen, and they were destroyed for it. This is one of the ways we know that this nation is the seed of Ephraim, because the blessings and the curses and the prophecies over Joseph and Ephraim have followed this nation. And that's that's part of Ephraim's inheritance. He holds the birthright. Well, all descendants of Joseph and Ephraim, of Ephraim's descendants, tribe of Joseph, and the house of Israel, the northern kingdom, they're going to share that prophetic tendency, the nature, the character, the Shem. So we're going to repeat this. So where do we find the two houses get divided? It's in Jeremiah 3. When I was thinking 31, 33 in that area, I'm thinking of the New Covenant. But I printed all of Jeremiah 3 out. I want to go through it. And remember, I'm using the NASB, but I have gone through and replaced the names. Elohim says, if a husband divorces his wife and she leaves him and becomes another man's wife, will he return to her again? Would the land not be completely defiled? But you are a prostitute with many lovers, yet you return to me, declares Yahweh. And stop right there, verse 1. That right there, folks, is Romans 7. Paul is thinking the same way that Jeremiah is thinking here when he's talking in Romans 7. He even says, if a husband divorces his wife and remarries her, the land is defiled. It's exactly, that comes out of Leviticus and Deuteronomy with the law of Moses. So this is right away, for those of us who were raised in the visible church, who think the law's done away with, this is a clear indication that Paul is still thinking the same way Jeremiah is thinking, and the same way that Moses' law was written, the Torah laws and covenants under Moses. Well, if the law was done away, why is Paul still doing this? That makes no sense. But this also tells us, this is another indirect indication that the rabbit we're chasing right now with the two houses, Paul knows it. And this is part of what Paul's doing in Romans 7. Paul knows that Yahweh cannot remarry the northern kingdom unless he dies first, or he'll defile the land. He'd break his own commandments, and then he wouldn't be Yahweh. So this passage continues in verse 2. Raise your eyes to the bare heights and see, where have you not been violated? So, they go up on mountains to worship the false gods. You have sat for them by the roads like an Arab in the desert, and you have defiled a land which you with your prostitution and your wickedness. Therefore the showers have been withheld, and there have been no spring rain. Now, stop there for a moment. Prostitution here, this is apostasy. I've told you before, in the prophetic language, apostasy is always represented as harlotry, prostitution, unfaithfulness, always. I have not found an exception. I've been studying the prophets for about 20 years now, not as well as, Brother Kenyon did and all, not as long, but I do rather focused searches, and I've yet to find the prophets use the imagery of a harlot for anything other than apostasy. So we're dealing with apostasy, and then it tells us, the showers have been withheld. I have no doubt that probably meant drought, but you need to be careful with this as well, because remember I've taught you spiritual, then physical. The physical reflection there would be the drought, but spiritually rain is a blessing. So in the prophetic language, this could mean the spiritual blessings have been withheld. But now if you live in the desert, the physical blessing is going to be rain. Do not dismiss that possibility there, because everybody thinks, I'm going to call down fire and I'm going to withhold the rain. Prophets see this. Yes, it could be physical. It probably is. Don't get me wrong. But if I look spiritual first, the rain is blessing and fire is curse. So we've got to be careful with this. And if you read the prophets carefully, you're going to realize that the word of Yahweh can also be a curse to the wicked. Okay, the word of Yahweh is a blessing to the faithful and the righteous, but it's a curse to the wicked, because that's what ends up sending them to Hades, to Sheol, gets them locked out of the kingdom. So therefore the showers have been withheld, and there has been no spring rain. Yet you had a prostitute's forehead. In other words, your thoughts were always away other than Yahweh. You refused to be ashamed. Have you not just now called me my father? You are the friend of my youth. Will he be angry forever, or keep his anger to the end? Behold, you have spoken and have done evil things, and you have had your own way. This should ring for us today. What he's doing here is, y'all remember what the Northern Kingdom did? They separated, they set up their own temples, and they set up their own Levites, and they started keeping just the first 5 books of the scripture, the Pentateuch, and they're going to do things their way. So they set up their own priesthood, their own feasts. They did all their things their way, and they claim to be worshiping Yahweh. And Yahweh's chastising them right here. You're calling on me and you're doing things your way, but you're not honoring me my way. You're not showing me honor. You're not obeying. We're doing the same thing in the visible churches today. I just saw an article last night on a church that's teaching the rainbow LGBT garbage in their church. Well, that's not a church anymore. It's not a church of Yahweh. And it's a main Protestant denomination, and they're teaching it in their congregations. It's becoming part of their platform. I didn't even read far enough to see which denomination it was, because that's an apostasy. It's a heresy. It's open rebellion to Yahweh. So that's not one of Yahweh's churches. They can claim to be his people, but they're not. And folks, for those who worry about this stuff or wonder about it, it's not, why does Yahweh hate homosexuality? It's for the same reason he hates sexual relations outside of marriage. It's not the way he designed his creation to function. It's chaotic. It's disorder. It's the opposite of what we were called to do. We were called to bring order to his creation, his way, according to his desires, on earth as it is in heaven. So this is the way he created. He said it was good. It was very good. Then he told us how to keep it running even, his way. Well, when we break with the natural order of things, it's a sin. It's a violation of the creation he made and handed us to be stewards over. This is why he hates it, because you are bringing chaos to his order. In a sense, you are trying to reorder his creation, which means you're claiming to be him. So verse 6, and this is where we start getting into the meat of this. Then Yahweh said to me in the days of King Uzziah, have you seen what faithless Israel did? She went up on every high hill and under every leafy tree, and she prostituted herself there. In other words, she worshipped other Elohim, other lesser, false gods. Said, yet I thought after she had done all these things, she will return to me. But she did not return. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it. Now Yahweh is speaking through Jeremiah as though Israel and Judah are two different, what Joellen likes to call daughters or wives. They're Yahweh's two wives. So we'll call them the wives. And I saw that for all the adulteries of of faithless Israel, I had sent her away and given her a certificate of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but she went and prostituted herself also. Stop right there. In the Hebrew, it says, I gave her a get. This is the divorce you get before you've consummated your marriage with your betrothed husband. This is the type of divorce that Joseph was contemplating giving Mary. This is before the wedding supper. So at this point, Judah and Israel are both betrothed to Yahweh. He's married to them. In the Hebrew sense, even though they haven't had the wedding supper and consummated the marriage, they're married, just like Mary was married to Joseph, even though they hadn't been together yet. In the Hebrew way of doing this, they're married. Yahweh gave Israel a get, a divorce. If you're no longer married to Yahweh, you are spiritually dead. You're lost. I have been working on this for a while. Yes, the tribes that we call lost have been, we don't know where they're at anymore. They've been physically lost. Spiritual first, then physical. They were spiritually lost because they were given a divorce, which means they're kicked out of the kingdom. They've lost their inheritance. Part of your inheritance is eternal life. They're lost. They've been given up. Yahweh did away with them. Verse 9. And because of the thoughtlessness of her prostitution, this is Judah, she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and trees. In this case, idols, which represent false gods. Yet in spite of all of this, her treacherous sister Judah did not return to me with all her heart, but rather in deception, declares Yahweh. How did Judah return in deception? When Judah comes back from Babylon, she remains faithful, but the rabbis start changing Yahweh's Torah, and they start messing with it. So that's still a form of Yahweh sees it as deception. You pretend to be my faithful wife, but you're not. You're still rebellious. You're still kicking at the boards with me. It says, and Yahweh, it continues, and Yahweh said to me, faithless Israel has proven herself to be more righteous than treacherous Judah. Go and proclaim these words toward the north and say, return, faithless Israel, declares Yahweh. I will not look at you in anger, for I am gracious, declares Yahweh. I will not be angry forever. Only acknowledge your wrongdoing, that you have revolted against Yahweh your Elohim, and have scattered your favors to the strangers under every leafy tree. And you have not obeyed my voice, declares Yahweh. Return, you faithless sons, declares Yahweh, for I am a master to you, and I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and bring you to Zion. Now, Zion is a way of saying it is the hill in Jerusalem. That's also the city of Yahweh. That's his kingdom. This is the mountain that will grow out of the stone cut with unhewn hands or whatever, not human hands in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, takes over the whole world. That's Zion. You notice this language? I'll take you one from a city and two from a family. Does that remind you of anything in the New Testament?
Two in the field.
Exactly. Two in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. Bingo. So when you think that that's about the rapture, it may not be. What it might mean is that this child in this family will believe, and that one will believe, and this one won't. He'll take the believers from the family, not necessarily the family itself. He'll take the faithful. It says, verse 15, it says, then I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you knowledge and understanding. And it shall be in those days when you become numerous and are fruitful in the land, declares Yahweh, they will no longer say, the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, and it will not come to mind, nor will they remember it, nor miss it, nor will it be made again. At that time, they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh, and all the nations will assemble at it, at Jerusalem, for the name of Yahweh, and they will no longer follow the stubbornness of their evil heart. In those days, the house of Judah will walk with the house of Israel, and they will come together from the land of the north to the land that I gave your fathers as an inheritance. He's talking about the second Exodus, but this is confusing here. Confusing for me, because he's going to say the house of Judah and the house of Israel will walk together. Well, they're doing that now. The faithful are doing that now, but this doesn't seem to be after. It seems to be before Ezekiel 37, because he's talking about the two houses. He doesn't say anything about the house of Judah and the house of Israel will come back together as one stick, as one house. He's still talking about them as two. So I don't know what to make with that yet, because I know not to read my prophets in linear language. But in that chapter 3, Yahweh gives the house of Israel a divorce. From this point on, at least from that point in physical time, from the captivity in Babylon, Yahweh's people should be thinking about the northern and southern kingdoms as two different brides, two different houses, two different people. They're not just all Jews. They're Hebrews, but the Jews are the southern kingdom only, not the northern. And the northern kingdom are not Jews, even though they're Hebrews. They're descendants of Jacob. But that being a descendant of Jacob doesn't make you a Jew. Being a descendant of Judah makes you a Jew, or the kingdom of Judah, which included Benjamin and half the Levites and some of Simeon. So how do I know that this is the proper interpretation? Well, this is going to be a long one. We're going to read Jeremiah 31 next. And I know it's proper because Yahweh is going to tell me in this chapter through Jeremiah.
This is maybe a rabbit off to the side, but as you were reading that, in verse 16, it talks about, you'll increase your fruit in the land and such, and they will no longer say the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, neither would it come to their heart, nor would they remember it, nor would they visit it, nor would it be made again. Does not this defeat the idea of the third temple?
In the temple, in the sense that we think about it, a physical temple?
Physical temple.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it does. So does Ezekiel. When you read Ezekiel carefully. So I'm going to go to Jeremiah 31. And we're going to do what we just did. We're going to read pieces of it, and we're going to stop and start as we go through. So it says, at that time, declares Yahweh, I will be the Elohim of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Right there. All the families of Israel. I don't think he's talking about just the northern kingdom here. He's talking about the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. He's talking about Jacob. He's also talking about all those grafted in, to the best of my understanding. And you'll understand that, or you'll be able to at least see that understanding. You might disagree, because you can. There are other ways to read this. He could be talking about just the northern kingdom. But as we go through the rest of this chapter, and you see the greater context of what the prophet's saying to us, it continues, verse 2. This is what Yahweh says. The people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness. This is the northern kingdom, the people who survived the attack of Assyria. Where's the wilderness? At the time the prophets are writing, the wilderness is anything outside the physical promised land of Israel. Any other nation, that's wilderness. Why? Because you are outside the kingdom of Yahweh. You are in the enemy's territory.
You're outside the geography of Yahweh.
And in the Hebrew mind, it means you're outside the camp, which means you're outside of safety. He says, Israel, when it went to find its rest. When it went to find its rest. We're going to cover this in later chapters, but Brother Kenyon has been all over this for decades. Israel is going to be given another land to rest and regain its strength that is not the holy promised land. It will come back to the promised land, but that's not where it's going to regain its strength, its rest. Yes, ma'am.
Comment from Aaron Spikes. The first temple was built by Moses, the second by Solomon, and the third was Herod's temple.
That's one way to look at it. First temple was going to be the tabernacle. That might actually work with Ezekiel. We'll come back to that. Good job, Aaron. That's why I need your pieces. That's actually a good thought. All right. The people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness, Israel, when it went to find its rest. Yahweh appeared to him long ago, saying, I love you with an everlasting love. See how there's that muddled thinking. He's talking about Israel and the northern kingdom, but now he's blended that with Israel the man. And therefore, and Israel the man and Israel the nation as a person. So this is Middle Eastern thinking. It all works. It's all the same way of understanding it. So don't be one of those believers who takes just one of those ways that works, and that's the only way you can think of it. Understand and accept that there are more than one way to read this, and they all work. It could be Israel, the northern kingdom, Israel, the man, Israel as a man, personification. Therefore, I have drawn you out with kindness. I will build you again, and you will be rebuilt, virgin of Israel. I'll come back to that in a minute. You will take up your tambourine again and go out and dance the dances of the revelers. Virgin of Israel. Going to rebuild you. Anybody have any idea what the heck the prophet means here? You're going to rebuild the northern kingdom, virgin, so that she can be re-betrothed to her husband. In other words, he's going to renew her, restore her, make her able to be betrothed back to himself. That tells you you're talking about the northern kingdom. Why? Southern kingdom was never divorced. You will take up your tambourine again and go out to the dance of the revelers. Again, you will plant vineyards, and in the hills of Samaria, the planters will plant, and you will enjoy the fruit. For there will be a day when watchmen on the hills of Ephraim call out, arise, and let's go up to Zion, to Yahweh our Elohim. For this is what Yahweh says, sing aloud with joy for Jacob, and be joyful with the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, say, Yahweh, save your people, the remnant of Israel. The remnant of Israel. That could be all Israel there. You got to be careful with this. I don't know. Behold, I am bringing them from the north country, and I will gather them from the remote parts of the earth. Now, in the Hebrew mind, the north country is where the enemies come from. That's where the enemy dwells. So this could equally be from a country north of Israel. It could also mean from the enemy's camp. I will gather them from the remotest parts of the earth. Well, what's the enemy's camp? The wilderness. So all of this works in the Hebrew mindset. Hopefully you're seeing this. Among them, those who are blind and those who limp, the pregnant woman and she who is in labor together, they will return here as a great assembly. They will come with weeping, and by pleading I will bring them. I will lead them by streams of waters on a straight path on which they will not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Ephraim. You're talking about the northern kingdom right here. Why does he single out Ephraim? Ephraim holds the birthright. All the promises made to Abraham rest with Ephraim. So this is why this is important. If he's going to finish being Yahweh, if he's going to fulfill all the promises he made to Abraham, it has to be done through the descendants of Ephraim. He's the one who holds the birthright now. That's who holds the promises, who gave it to Ephraim, the man Israel. Hear the word of Yahweh, you nations, and declare it to the coastlands far away. And say, he who scatters Israel will gather him, and he will keep him as a shepherd keeps his flock. For Yahweh has ransomed Jacob. Now that's all of Jacob's descendants, and redeemed him from the hand of him who was stronger than he. So Jacob's been redeemed. They will come and shout for joy on the height of Zion. And they will be radiant over the bounty of Yahweh, over the grain, the new wine, and the oil, and over the young of the flock and the herd. And their life will be like a watered garden, and they will never languish again. Then the virgin will rejoice in the dance, and the young men and the old together. For I will turn their mourning into joy, and comfort them, and give them joy for their sorrow. I will refresh the souls of the priests with abundance, and my people will be satisfied with my goodness, declares Yahweh. This is what Yahweh says. Now notice, we've just talked about restoring not only the house of Israel, Ephraim, but now you're talking about Jacob, all back together. This is going to be after Ezekiel 37. The two sticks are back together. Now read what it says here. This is what Yahweh says. A voice is heard in Ramah, lamenting and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more. All right. I know that this has been used in the New Testament for the weeping of the children of Bethlehem when Herod sends his men to kill all of the newborn sons. Given where this is placed in the book of Jeremiah, I think you've got an and here. Ramah is a city. There are several Ramahs in the scripture. The Ramah of Benjamin, which is in the land of Ephraim. It's connected with Rachel's burial in the Genesis. It's going to be connected there. It's also connected with several other things dealing with the invasion of the southern kingdom and all this other stuff. But if y'all will remember, Jacob curses whoever has Laban's idols, curses them to death, let them die. Who had the idols? Rachel. Did Rachel die? No. But Rachel's been cursed, so her descendants have to die. Otherwise, because, folks, Jacob's a prophet. He prophesied over, let whoever has them die. What happened when the house of Israel was given a get? Did the house of Israel not die? Spiritually. Yes, the bones are dried. So who's Rachel crying over here? The children of Bethlehem or the northern kingdom? Or both? It works for both. But in this case, given where Jeremiah put it, I think he's talking about weeping over the northern kingdom. Now that passage will work for the children of Bethlehem later on. But there's one little catch. Who does the Messiah come from? Judah? Is Rachel Judah's mother? No. So those children that were killed in Bethlehem, they're Benjamites and Judites and half the Levites. They're not Rachel's children. House of Israel is. This is what the verse 16. This is what Yahweh says. Restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares Yahweh, and they will return from the land of the enemy, the wilderness. There is hope for your future, declares Yahweh, and your children will return to their own territory. I have certainly heard Ephraim grieving. This is how we know, Rick, this is how we know that the second Exodus will be a return to the Holy Land. You have disciplined me, and I was corrected, like an untrained calf. This is Ephraim talking now. Bring me back that I may be restored, for you are Yahweh, my Elohim. For after I turned back, I repented, and after I was instructed, I slapped my thigh. I was ashamed and also humiliated, because I bore the shame of my youth. Is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a delightful child? Indeed, as often as I have spoken against him, I certainly still remember him. Therefore, my heart yearns for him. I will certainly have mercy on him, declares Yahweh. Set up road marks for yourself. Place guideposts for yourself. Direct your mind to the highway, the way by which you went. Return, O Virgin of Israel. Return to these cities. This is going to be in the Holy Land. We're still in chapter 31 with Jeremiah. It says, how long will you waver, you rebellious daughter? For Yahweh has created new things on earth. A woman will shelter a man. This is what Yahweh of armies, the Elohim of Israel, says. Once again, they will speak this word in the land of Judah and in the cities when I restored their fortunes. Now you're talking about the southern kingdom. Yahweh bless you, O place of righteousness, O holy hill. That's going to be the Temple Mount, the city of Yahweh, the kingdom of Yahweh, the rule of Yahweh. Judah and all the cities will live together in it, the farmers and those who travel with flocks. For I give plenty of water to the weary ones and refresh everyone who languishes. At this I awoke and looked, and my sleep had been pleasant to me. This is Jeremiah now talking there. So at the very end, Yahweh also says, I'm going to restore Judah as well. So Judah's still going to be in the land blessed. Now Jeremiah goes straight into this one. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of mankind and the seed of animals. And just as I have watched over them to uproot them, tear them down, ruin, destroy, and bring disaster on them, so I will watch over them to build and to plant them, declares Yahweh. So he's going to tear them down, but he's also going to build them. He's going to put them back in the Holy Land, but he's also going to restore them in whatever nation they're in at the time. Now I want to stop right here for a minute. He's going to sow the house of Judah and the house of Israel with the seed of man and the seed of animals. I think this probably has a dual meaning. Abundance. You're going to have an abundant, the people are going to grow. Where are the? Yep. There we go. But there's a passage in Peter where he talks about men who are nothing more than animals, good for nothing but to be led to the slaughter. I don't mean to be, we can stop until we're all better here. I'm also kind of wondering if this passage isn't also going to tell us that we're going to have a lot of basically wolves in and amongst Yahweh's people. This would sit with the Canaanites are always going to be wherever the house of Israel is. It's also going to sit with the way of reading Isaiah. If you go back and read the chapter of Isaiah, where the wolf and the lamb will sleep together, or the lion and the lamb, and all these things. People think that's going to be literal. Better be careful with that, especially in that chapter Isaiah is writing. It probably means that the tares and the wheat will grow together. Same thing could be here. What you have is a man that is beast-like. And you have another image of this in Daniel. How is Nebuchadnezzar described when he goes mad? As a beast. So if he totally loses any connection with spirituality, and not even apostasy, he becomes an atheist or whatever, or a non-believer, Nebuchadnezzar could easily be seen as a man, as a beast. He goes mad. He becomes what the New Testament would call depraved. So I'm not sure how that passage should be read there. There are multiple ways of reading it, and none of them would conflict with the other, so we could read it as both. Then when we pick up in verse 29, in those days they will no longer say, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, but it is the children's teeth that have become blunt. Now, I now understand what this means. In the Old Testament, they had a communal way of living. So if dad becomes a believer, the whole house could be saved. But you're going into the New Testament in these days. This is the new covenant, the renewed covenant. He's saying no longer will the children suffer for the father's crimes. How do I know that that's the correct interpretation? Verse 30, but everyone will die for their own wrongdoing. Each person who eats the sour grapes, his own teeth will become blunt. That could be physical death, but I think what we're talking about here is spiritual death. You are now going into the renewed covenant will be individual, not communal. Why would that be? The new covenant is going to go outside of the nation of Israel. Zion, the word is going to go forth from Zion, the gospel, the word of Yahweh, the Torah. Well, you're going to go into a land that at that time is mostly Greek-minded. If you're going to get outside of the Mesopotamian basin, the Middle Near East, now you're into that Greco-Roman mindset. Well, that's individualistic. So the new covenant was set up in such a way that now it can talk to the Gentile nations as well. So I think that's what we're dealing with here, is a spiritual message first and physical second. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them. They were married until he divorces the house of Israel. I was a husband to them, declares Yahweh. For this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days. Now, he's just told us he's going to make this covenant with Judah as well, but now he's going to stress Israel. I will put my law within them and write it on their heart, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. Well, why is he going to focus on the house of Israel there and not Judah? Well, look what he just said he's going to do. He's going to put his law within their heart. Is the law of Yahweh, is the Torah of Yahweh already in the heart of Judah? If you're a faithful member of the house of Judah, what we would think of as a Orthodox Jew today, is the law not already in your heart? They've almost turned it into an idol. They love it so much. You don't have to put the law of Torah, the love of Torah, back into the heart of the house of Judah. Faithful Judah already has it. They have not lost it since they returned from Babylon, which is part of other prophecies. They came back deceitful, but they have not forgotten who they worship. They have not. They're still apostate in a lot of ways, but they have not left their father, their husband. You will be my people. They will not teach again each one of his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, know Yahweh, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yahweh. For I will forgive their wrongdoing, and their sin I will no longer remember. This is what Yahweh says. He who gives the sun for light by day, and the fixed order of the moon and the stars for light by night, that's natural law. I fix the natural laws. This is something that no other Elohim in the ancient world would do. The people believed that the gods got upset, the sun wouldn't come up, or the moon wouldn't work, or whatever. Yahweh's here is declaring himself to be different and set apart from everybody else in the time. Part of how they would see things. But he says, if you can change this, and then who stirs up the seas, that it was waves roar, Yahweh of armies is his name. If this fixed order departs from me, declares Yahweh, then the descendants of Israel also will cease to be a nation before me forever. This is what Yahweh says. If the heavens above can be measured, and the foundations of the earth searched out below, then I will also reject all the descendants of Israel for everything that they have done, declares Yahweh. Modern times, they keep trying to find the edges of the galaxy, and all they find is more and more and more space. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when the city will be rebuilt for Yahweh from the tower of Hanel to the corner gate. The measuring line will go forth straight ahead to the hill of Gareb. Then it will turn to Goah, and in the entire valley of the dead bodies and of the ashes and all the fields, as far as the brook Kidron to the corner of the horse gate toward the east, shall be holy to Yahweh. It will not be uprooted or overthrown ever again, which tells us some of this has not been fulfilled. So we know now that in Jeremiah, Yahweh definitely gave the house of Israel a divorce. So I'm going to jump to Jeremiah 33. And I just want to go, I'm not going to read the whole thing this time. I'm going to go to verse 29. Gave the house of Israel a divorce. These are the two peoples, his two witnesses. The two witnesses of Revelation are the house of Israel and the house of Judah. How do I know this? I'll show you in a minute. But one of them's a wild tree, according to the book of Revelation, a wild oak tree or wild vine, wild vine. The other one's domestic. Of the two brides, which one's wild? The one that was given the divorce, the house of Israel, is wild. They're not still part of Israel, because at that point they were given a divorce, but yet they are still going to be part of total Israel, Yahweh's kingdom, because Yahweh, even though he divorces them and throws them out into the wilderness, his prophets tell us he is not going to totally give them up. Hosea is really good about this, and we'll be getting that in the next few weeks. But we pick up in verse 20. Okay, it's 23. I'm sorry. 23.
I was waiting for it too.
Folks, you know I'm wearing my weird glasses, right? I don't have the near sight on these. These are not my trifocals. And the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah saying, have you not observed what these people have asserted? In other words, the Gentile nations, saying the two families which Yahweh chose, he has rejected them. So they despise my people as no longer being a nation in their sight. The two families. What two families did Yahweh choose? But they're no longer a single people in my sight. They're no longer Jacob in their sight. The two families are Judah and Israel. I have run into a lot of believers that are still in the visible church who tell me that I'm reading Jeremiah wrong. The only way to knit some of the other prophecies together in a way that's going to make sense for people is if you have the two household ideas in your head. Paul does. This is why Paul tells you, if you're a Gentile when you come to the Yahweh, stay a Gentile, don't become a Jew. Because if we all convert to Judaism, and every believer in the world is now a Jew, what happened to the birthright? Gone. And if the birthright's gone, where'd the promises go? Gone. Paul knows this stuff. And this is why part of the reason we read Paul wrong is we've given up that Torah observant understanding of Paul. Even though Paul tells us over and over and over again, the law is a blessing to us. The law is holy. The law is good when it's used righteously.
And this verse is significant, at least to me, because what this is showing is why this is so important to Yahweh. Because he's saying that the other nations are looking at his people and saying that he has rejected them. In other words, saying that he's no longer a God before them. And this is significant because this is the disgrace of his Shem, his name. And that is so important to him. And that's why this is all so important in seeing how these.
And now you understand why I went over shame and honor in the ancient world yesterday.
Yes, because this is now showing that Yahweh is not going to do that. He's going to bring them back together.
Whether they like it or not.
Whether they like it or not, right. So that he can reestablish and recover the honor of his name.
One of the passages talking about bringing the house of Israel home says, I will drive them back to their holy land, back to their ancient lands. He's going to drive you back, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And we started in Isaiah. I'm going back to Isaiah. I'm going to go to chapter 43, starting in verse 8. Bring out the people who are blind, even though they have eyes, and those who are deaf, even though they have ears. All the nations have gathered together so that the people may be assembled. Who among them can declare this and proclaim to us the former things? Let them present their witnesses so that they may be justified. In other words, let the pagans present their witnesses, the Gentiles. Or let them hear and say, it is true. You are my witnesses, declares Yahweh, and my servant whom I have chosen. Now, is he talking to the Gentiles there, or is he talking to Israel? He's talking to Israelites. He's talking to his people. You are my witnesses. He just said, let the Gentiles come and bring out their witnesses, and you be my witnesses, so that they may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no Elohim formed, and there will be none after me. I am Yahweh, and there is no Savior beside me. It is I who have declared and saved and proclaimed, and there was no strange Elohim among you. So you are my witnesses, declares Yahweh, and I am Elohim. Even from eternity I am he, and there is no one who can rescue from my hand. I act, and who can reverse it? We are his witnesses. His two families, one nation. The stick of Joseph, the stick of Judah. The house of Israel, the house of Judah. And once we understand this, the prophets are going to start reading very differently. And guess what? The apostles, yes, the apostles are prophets, folks. Messiah's a prophet. Paul's a prophet. When you start reading them, understanding that you have two houses in mind, to whom was Messiah sent?
But to the house.
Messiah says, I was sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And when he sends out the 70, where does he tell them to go? Don't go to Judah. Don't go to Samaria. Go but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And when you read about Caiaphas, and when they're going to crucify, they're going to have Yeshua killed. He says, if we let this man go on, he will bring back the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Well, if Caiaphas knew that Yeshua was going to do that, guess what Caiaphas also knew? He knew exactly who Yeshua was. Because they already knew that it was Messiah who would bring back the lost sheep. That was in their mind. So the idea that the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin didn't have some notion of who the Messiah was, I've rejected that. I know people tell me they didn't know. I think they knew exactly who he was. And it's still in what Caiaphas says. If he brings the people back, we will lose our place. Caiaphas liked his honor and his comfort in this world. He wasn't a believer. He was exactly what the Messiah told him he was. He was a child of his father, Satan, the devil. When you know what Yahweh told us through the prophet Jeremiah, that he split the two houses, why would he do that? The northern kingdom is seeds scattered throughout the whole world, throughout the Gentile world. They were driven everywhere. And it got to the point where nobody knows who they are anymore. What was Abraham promised? It's going to be many nations. We covered this yesterday. In Genesis 48, when Isaac blesses Ephraim, he says he's going to be a company of nations. But that's not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says he's going to be the fullness of the Gentiles. But Abraham is promised to be a multitude or company of nations, of peoples. Have you ever heard of where all of the lost tribes, the supposed lost tribes, landed in Europe when they left the Holy Land? Have you ever studied the heraldry of all the royal families in Europe? Have you ever studied Daniel and where Daniel went? I mean, not Daniel, Dan rather. Dan, the tribe of Dan, and where they went and where they're located in what we would think of as secular history. All of those royal families in Europe, we think of them as just being inbred and what's the word? Not adulterous. Incestuous. Thank you. I'm having one of those senior moments. Incestuous. Well, there's a reason for that. They all come from the northern kingdom. Most of them come from Dan. And that can be traced now. We have the information. We know this. This is the northern kingdom, the house of Israel, seeding the world. Why? So that when Judah is finally driven out of Israel and when the disciples of the Messiah come out of the Holy Land and the word goes out from Zion, when the rider on the horse with the bent bow of Judah from Zechariah goes out into the world, these people are already spiritual sons of the Most High. They will receive the gospel readily, and the Gentiles will now see the Father preached, the word preached, and they'll respond to it. And you are now going to go from physical geography to spiritual geography. Physical boundaries no longer matter because Satan is chained at the cross and he can no longer fool the nations. Fool them how? Fool them into thinking that their other gods are actually gods. Now, when has that stopped in recent history where the pagan world, the Gentile world now starts thinking that there are actually other gods again? That has happened in recent time with the return of the gods. When the gods come back, what should we see? Child sacrifice, people worshiping things like money, and we should also see sexual androgyny and weirdness, perversions of sexual perversions promoted. That's going to be Moloch, Baal, Moloch, and Ashtoreth, Ishtar. Same woman, same goddess. We have all three of those in our country right now. Huge. Why would they be focal point here in this country rather than the rest of the world? Because we are Ephraim. They're going to come right back after Yahweh's people. Exactly what they're doing. There's only one other place on earth where the LGBT community is stronger than it is here. Y'all know where that is? Israel. You remember when they got attacked at that rave a year or so ago? Y'all realize what type of music and what they were doing at that rave? It was worse than Woodstock. They got attacked by Islam, which is an apostasy, a gross apostasy of the scriptures. But it is still an apostasy, which means it's an apostasy. It's a twisting or perverting of Yahweh's word. It's not a total pagan god, but it's a gross perversion of the original to the point that you can't recognize it anymore. But Yahweh's people got attacked by an apostate people for chasing after other gods. Well, that's exactly what he just did here in Jeremiah. He sends the Assyrian gods, he whistles for the bee and the fly to attack the northern kingdom. Now, he later deals with Assyria and the Philistines and the Egyptians. And I have no doubt he will later deal with Islam rather. But he's going to punish his people first. Why? Judgment starts in the house of the Lord. Next week, if you want to know where I'm going to be in the prophecies of Ephraim specifically. But if you want to get a little ahead of us, just start reading Hosea. Just start reading Hosea. It's not a very long chapter, But when you read it, pay attention to the houses. Questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions, anything? Okay. Thanks, brothers and sisters.